Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Chorus Daily Briefing. Today, I have the founder and CEO of the Bridge Group with me. Bridge Group helps B2B companies build world-class sales organizations, now focusing on customer success selling as well. Trish Bertuzzi, so great to have you here this morning. How are you?
Jim, I'm so good. I mean, as good as anyone else in these crazy times.
Yeah, you're holding up?
Yeah, I would say I am. Maybe drinking a little more than normal, but who isn't? But yeah, all good.
So great to have you here. I have followed your data for many, many years past on just all of the different stats that you've published from the Bridge Group on inside sales teams and how many reps hit quota. And I've quoted these, and just great to spend some time together today.
And all that data is going to change.
It is going to change. I'm curious, as you've worked so closely with inside sales teams that are typically in offices, at least from my experience, how are they handling working from home? Any observations that you're seeing out there?
Well, I mean, I think it's a transition for everyone, and it's not just inside sales teams, right? So it's, sales development, inside sales very much is an umbrella term. Field sales. What if you're a field sales guy and now you can't travel? Well, yeah, now you're an inside salesperson. So I think it's impacted everyone across the board on both the seller side and the buyer side, because don't forget, our buyers are now working from home too. So right. It is a brave new world out there. I think we're in transition. I think for a couple weeks it was crazy. Then we kind of settled in. Now I think we're figuring things out. So we will figure this out, and but things will never go back to the way they were. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Well, let me get your perspective on some of our most recent data. So let's kick off looking at specifically cold call dials. We've showed this for several weeks, and now we've got the most updated data. And once again, cold call dials are down significantly. So we're down 48% since January, and week over week down again. Connect rates on the right hold steady. So if we do make the dials, we connect at the same levels. We're just half the volume. Is this what you're seeing out there with your clients?
Well, I mean, I think it varies client to client, right? So that's the challenge with data, right? So if you're selling into a highly disrupted industry versus someone who's selling something into a non-disrupted industry, you're going to see apples and oranges when it comes to data. So the cold call data the fact that it's down doesn't really surprise me, but I think it's silly, because if connect rates are the same, why aren't we using the phone, right? Yeah. If connect rates are remaining consistent, why aren't we using the phone? As a matter of fact, I'm hearing from some of our clients that they're actually having more conversations, because that thing that used to sit on people's desks that they ignored, that thing called a desk phone.
Yep.
Now a lot of them have it forwarded to their cell. So I think the phone is going to make a major comeback. Plus, people aren't sitting in those useless meetings they used to sit in. They're not commuting. There's a lot of reasons to continue to use the phone as part of our strategy, and I'm hoping people get back to that.
Couldn't agree more. How do you keep people motivated right now? So the front line, BDRs, SDRs, AEs that are out there, how do we keep our teams motivated during this time, especially as we think about cold calls and outbound motions?
Yeah, so, I think you have to have empathy, right? Well, first of all, we firmly believe that everyone should get a work-at-home stipend. If you're a BDR, SDR, if you don't have a regular work-at-home office, what are you, hunkered over like your laptop sitting on the couch or at the kitchen table? Let's give people some funds so they can set up a real home office, right? So that's rule number one. Super motivating if your neck isn't killing you every day, right?
Any recommendation on the amount?
I think it would depend. I would leave it up to every company to say, here's what we're going to give you, and here's how you can spend it. Things aren't that expensive. If you want a stand-up desk, you don't have to buy a Veridesk for whatever crazy money they are. Sorry, Veridesk, but you are crazy money. But you can buy something, or a second monitor, or whatever. I think even $500 would go a long way for helping people set up good home environments. So that's one thing. Let's take care of their physical well-being by allowing them to invest in a proper work environment. The other thing I think is motivating is unless you as an executive or leader are actually also doing their job, you don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
So if you're leading a team, grab some inbound leads and follow up on them. And if you're lucky to have inbound leads, hell yeah, follow up on them, right? Target some outbound, some accounts and do some outbound. Walk a mile, and I don't mean an hour, I mean a mile in their shoes so you can see what their job is like, how the buyers are reacting, how the message is resonating. That is real empathy. Not just saying, what can I do for you? But actually saying, oh my God, here's 3 challenges I found. Are you facing that too? Let's fix them. That's empathy, and I think that's motivating.
That is wonderful feedback. I think that in the spirit of a little bit of the wartime mode that we've been in, at least for the last 6 to 8 weeks, I know we're coming a bit out of this, but I love that. I think I've found that in my past. Anytime you just get close to it, it feels great as a leader to be in it, so that you're no longer talking. You're in it, and you quickly see you see the realness of it, and you fail yourself, but then you figure out how to work through the challenge, and you just work as a team, and you quickly win the respect of the team to realize it is hard and we are going to have to change things. I'm curious on the messaging, any changes that you're seeing. You mentioned even with your survey, you might have to change the message. How are teams changing their messages right now?
So I think people are being more thoughtful about what they're sharing. So all the old automated Gatling gun messages that used to go out, I'm just going to create a sequence or a cadence, and I'm going to go into execution mode, and I'm going to treat everyone the same. I think messaging is going to change. I think people are being more strategic. I think people are looking at their buyers in a more segmented fashion. Mm-hmm. Like one of the reasons I think connect rates might be up, and I'm going to noodle on this a little bit, or have remained consistent, is I think we're smarter about who we're calling, right? I think if we're doing less, but the results are remaining the same, it's because we're being smarter about it. So maybe we're targeting people closer to our ideal customer profile, and maybe we're delivering messaging to them that is a bit more thought out and consultative. That's what the data is lending me to believe anyway.
I think it's right. I think that when authenticity, which we've talked about, pops up, and you're really having to be focused on, it's coming from the heart right now. I mean, you're really having to have the energy. I think people are choosing more wisely, and the messages are resonating a bit more.
I would agree with you.
I want to ask you about this customer success. I know you're doing more work on that field. We've been showing up some recent data this week, looking at the number of meetings from AEs versus CS. But the big question I have for you is around the land and expand. I've grown up in a land and expand. I've put that in place in my past. What is changing right now from land and expand to the more customer success selling motions that you're seeing out there?
So land and expand, I think, used to be about just straight up selling. Hey, you have seats, you want more? Hey, we got something new, you want to buy it? Whereas now I think people are realizing, okay, how do I stabilize my company? Well, one of the tools I have in my bag is to stabilize my customer base, to limit attrition, limit churn. So I think customer success, if that means are your customers successfully using your product or service, is ever more important, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure they're using it, if they're using it to its full capacity, they understand its capacity. Players, here's a big one, players are changing. Do you have your finger on the pulse of who actually owns the responsibility of implementing your solution at your customer sites? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's changing on a daily basis with layoffs and furloughs and all that. So I think people are starting to understand that you have to ask different questions and have different relationships with your customers.
When you think about the role of revenue expansion, there's a lot of opinion about whether it's in CS or sales, and it clearly depends on the type of business and what they're selling. What are you typically seeing out there on who's driving the expansion dollars?
It depends. I mean, there's a million variables. It depends on the complexity of your solution. It depends on where do you want your revenue to come from? It depends on the amount of resources that you have available to complete those tasks. You know, I'm big on the hashtag variables matter.
Yeah.
That's how I would answer that question. Variables matter.
Look, I think it's great. I think it's when people talk about playbooks, a lot of times playbooks are built for very specific, situations, and they don't always lend themselves to new situations. The magic is, being unique. So I like your variables comment.
Yeah.
Churn is top of mind for a lot of folks in the SaaS space right now. And there's real issues that we're dealing with. This isn't light stuff. How do you advice for folks out there that are working with customers that are trying to balance, saving customers, or do we expand them and try to hit Q2 targets? How do we balance this right now?
Well, before you can expand a customer, you need to make sure you have a relationship with that customer. So I'm going to go back to do you even know? Have the players changed? Does the person now responsible for your solution, they even know what you do, or how you do it, or why you do it, or who's using it? So, I think looking at usability data within our customers is going to be a critical success factor. I mean, being able to say, wait a minute, there was a lot more going on with them 6 months ago than there is now. What's going on? And reaching out and understanding that. So I think stabilization is the first thing we need to do from a revenue perspective. Then from there, you can go on to have follow-on conversations. But when you have those conversations, make sure they're relevant to the now and not to the then. Yeah. So I think we all have to pivot our message. We all have to iterate our message. Those are two words I use every day when I talk to people. They're my two new favorite words, pivot and iterate. And that applies to customers too. Don't assume that because they're your customer forever.
Trish, many leaders are used to walking into the office, walking right past the sales and success teams. You can see the rows and the benching of everybody. You can hear the energy, the headsets are on. And today it's completely empty. And so what are the metrics as we all, as leaders, sit at homes and have our teams sitting in their homes? How do we connect into that pulse? And what are the metrics and the ways that you think leaders can stay close to their teams? What would they look at to see if we're still doing our jobs effectively today?
Well, if I was a leader of a customer success team, I'd be calling customers so I knew what my people were going through, but we've already gone there. I think the metrics are dependent on what you're trying to accomplish. So is it stability? Is it expansion? Do you even have the ability to collect metrics? When people talk about metrics, they're always so focused on new logo metrics. Like we know everything about how to get a new logo, dials, connects, reach, whatever. We have metrics up the hoo-ha when it comes to new logos. When it comes to customers, what do we have? Churn? Retention and churn. Like, how about conversations and outcomes and next steps of those conversations? I think there's going to be a whole new set of metrics that we're going to need to develop and put into play so that we really understand what's going on in our businesses.
Well, you're speaking our language right now, for sure. One last data point I wanted to get your perspective on, and I think this is some of your data that you've shared in the past with our group, but just looking at churn rates and how we drive growth. Any perspective on some of these key stats?
Churn improves.
Yeah, 7%. The very best SaaS companies see 7% annual churn. That's a Tatango metric. And then yet, the median SaaS churn is 10%.
Well, once again, it depends, right? So it depends, if you're in a rip and replace strategy, it depends on your competitors. It depends on a million different things. The last bullet, I think, is the most relevant in that the larger the ACV, the more complicated it is for someone to switch off your technology, the less likely they are to do so. I mean, that makes sense to me. And I personally think these numbers are low.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how much of an impact a few percentage points makes on churn. I always say it's very difficult to grow and get big. if we have churn. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
number one thing you have to deal with if you want to grow and get into hyper growth mode.
Yeah. I think it would be really, really interesting for CS leaders nowadays to do exit interviews with customers. You know, because when someone leaves, what do we find in the database? Why did they leave? Lack of features, price too high, not using, whatever the case may be. But if we did exit interviews with our customers, and they'll give you the information, I think we would really find out what's going on, and it might allow us to make some deep changes in either our product or our strategy that would allow us to have greater retention rates in the future.
I think it makes a ton of sense. We spend, 6 to 9 months working feverishly to go win a new logo, a new account.
Exactly.
And then they disappear sometimes with a blink of an eye. And it's like, well, we got a quick email that someone's going to leave. And we see this across SaaS. And I think your point on exit interviews is terrific. And typically I've found that customers are happy to share. They've appreciated the relationship, and look, business changes and they'll share and they want us to learn, and they lose their customers. But I think that's a fantastic data point for people to consider right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Trish.
My biggest thing is for right now, for customer success, pay attention to your players, because it's a changing landscape every single day. And if you don't know who your internal champion is, makes it that much harder.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. Trish, really appreciate you kicking off today. Happy Wednesday, and wish you all the best.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, Trish. Bye-bye.